How's it going, everyone? Welcome back to Boylai Hobby Time. Last week I made this rotating Gandalf, and needless to say, it received mixed reviews. Thankfully, most of you have the same sense of humor that I do, and hopefully the rest of you won't mind just one more goofy build this week. As I was working on Gandalf, my mind was racing with all of the possibilities from other franchises that have iconic spinning things, and Star Wars obviously has a few, but to keep things in the spinning old man theme, of course I had to go with Palpatine. I'm going to be sculpting him from scratch, and just like last time, the story begins with a metal tube. The difference between Gandalf and Palpatine, though, is that one of them has a lightsaber, and getting power to a spinning lightsaber was a fun problem for me to solve this time. I began making Sheev, starting with some 1:12 scale hands, because I needed to move backward from here because the hands and the wiring were going to be such an important part of this build. I had a left and a right hand in the correct position, and here you can see them grasping a giant 1:12 scale drill bit. I rummaged through my metal bits bag, looking for a properly sized hilt for my lightsaber. I also drilled a hole through the right hand so that the wires would be completely invisible in the end. Originally, the plan was to use this red filament, but it's about 50% too long for the scale, and it's also super floppy, which would have been funny, but I decided to go with another one that's a little shorter and sturdier. With the lightsaber and hands figured out, I could bring back my metal tube and begin shaping it to match the pose of the right arm of Palpatine Diorama as he flies through the air. And with that bent and shaped, I could move on to the other arm and the rest of the armature, which I made from armature wire. Like I mentioned last time, sculpting with clay is not my go-to method for creating realistic characters for my dioramas, but for this project it made the most sense. I did try to take a little extra time to sculpt the face on this one. Not that it made it any better, but I was looking at a photo of a pre-messed up Palpatine while I sculpted this. And come to think of it, I probably also should have been looking at the clay while I was sculpting as well. I added the foundation layers of the clay, and once the head was the right size and the arms had a little bit of bulk, I began working on the details. Palpatine's face went through many stages of transformation during this process, including the spooky skull stage, Squidward stage, and then the kind old grandpa stage. Once his brow had been sculpted and pressed down to look a little bit more angry was finally when he began to look a little more like a Sith Lord. And after the face, I moved on to the rest of the outfit, which included some puffy sleeves that Anne of Green Gables would be jealous of, which I think adds to the humor of the spinning leap. I wrapped the dude in his robes and then shaved them down to size, making sure that the sleeves lined up with the hands. And after that, this acrobatic Palpatine Age Mutant Ninja Turtle was ready to be baked. I brought him back from the oven before he was completely cool, burning my hands a little bit. I then cleaned up my hobby mat and glued the hands in place. I also put a guide wire in there before I glued them so that I didn't shoot myself in the foot and make it impossible to run a wire through later. With the hands in place, it was time to start painting. I loaded up my airbrush with a black primer, and while I paint him, I'd like to give a huge shout out to all of my patrons. In case any of you watching this are concerned that the only thing you'll see from me going forward are rotating meme dioramas, you should be. I'm having a lot of fun with these, and even considering changing the channel name to Boylai Spinning Diorama Time. That was a joke, by the way. Don't go anywhere. I'll get back to making more normal stuff next time. At the end of the paint job, I ended up with someone that looked more like Darth Sidious than Chancellor Sheev, but you won't be able to tell when he's spinning at 300 RPM. After the painting was done, it was time to get the motor set up. It needed to be at a slight tilt to get Palpatine at the correct angle. He's supposed to be leaping through the air, not just flying perfectly level, and a little wedge on the front did the trick. I then screwed the motor to the bracket, and it was time to start working on Palpable's chair. I found this photo of the chair, which is actually a real product you can buy. So if you're looking for a cool, evil gaming chair, look no further. I then broke out some pink XPS foam to begin sculpting. I switched from a utility knife to a hot wire table, which made the process so much easier. Once I had all the base shapes of the chair cut out and glued together, I sliced up some thin sheets of XPS to put over top. This was to clean up and hide any mistakes and unsightly areas. I then used a little plastic funnel and a wargaming base for the stand of the chair, and the chair was done. Next, I extended the rotating shaft with a 6mm tube and a coupling joint, and then it was time to break out the piece that would make this whole build possible, and that was a slip ring. I thought I ordered a smaller one, but this one will work just fine. The idea here is that you can have static wires on one side and rotating wires on the other, allowing me to get power all the way to the lightsaber and keep it lit consistently the whole time without having the power source and switch on the rotating part. This piece is a game changer, and I'm really excited to use this for future dioramas. The wires that came with the slip ring were a little too big, so I trimmed those down, and then I drilled a small hole in the rotating shaft for the small wires, which will make their way all the way down to Darth Sidious's red lightsaber. I then made a panel for the back of the diorama, which will contain both the switch for the lightsaber and the speed dial for the motor, making this a nice, clean presentation. The plan was to try and hide everything behind the chair, but everything's too big for that, so I drilled a hole in another panel to hide the motor, and everything else will sit on a display platform in front of that. I marked and drilled a hole in the seat back, and then it was time to wire everything up. Once the motor had been connected to its power source and potentiometer, I tested it out to make sure it was working, which it was, and the next step was to run the wires for the lightsaber. I ran those all the way down the tube, to the slip ring, and then to the power source. I of course tested that before moving on to the next step, which was to seal up the box containing all of the electronics. And don't worry, I attached the far side with screws so that if I ever had to get back in there, I could. The next step was to secure the display platform on the front and glue the chair in place. I protected the foam on the chair with an acrylic primer sprayed from the airbrush before taking the rest of it outside and giving it a coat of light gray sprayed from a rattle can. I painted the cushions on the chair with white, followed by purple, and I covered up all the sides of the box with black 4.0. After cleaning up my workstation, the second to last thing to do was to put the Sith Lord in place. The tube that I sculpted him around is exactly the right size to pressure fit into the 6mm tube that is connected to the motor. And finally, the last thing to do was to paint the originally yellow lightsaber with a transparent red. I was able to rotate him around till the whole thing had been painted, and after that, I called it good.
It's treason, then.
Last time I said that my 1 million subscribers special was coming soon. This is not that video, that one still has yet to come. But that is it for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, hope you enjoyed. Huge shout out as always to my patrons, you guys are the best. Have an awesome week everyone, I'll see you next time.